Breaking news. Putin rejects Erdogan's offer to negotiate a grain deal. The Wall Street Journal reported on July 28, citing diplomats and analysts, that Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is ignoring requests from Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to hold talks regarding the extension of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, BSGI. Sources say that in recent weeks, Erdogan has made it clear that he wants to talk to Putin about renewing the agreement that allowed Ukrainian grain to be exported from Black Sea ports. However, the Turkish and Russian presidents have not had a phone conversation as of yet. Diplomats report that Ankara is making efforts to talk to Moscow about the crisis in other ways. According to the report, Russia declined to renew the grain agreement because Erdogan angered the Russian government. Earlier in July, Erdogan agreed to approve Sweden's entry into NATO and decided to return the defenders of Mariupol's Azovstal to Ukraine. On July 17, Russia officially withdrew from the Black Sea Grain Initiative, BSGI, ending the flow of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea to countries at risk of food insecurity. Russia's official justification for pulling out of the agreement on its own accord was that Ukraine had attacked the Kerch Bridge, which leads into occupied Crimea from Russian territory. Even in the Black Sea, Moscow has removed assurances of safe passage. One of the bloodiest and most consequential European conflicts in recent memory has been going on for over a year, ever since Russian President Vladimir Putin invaded neighboring Ukraine. As the world continues to follow the back and forth of Russian and Ukrainian forces fighting on both sides of an imperial expansion effort, images of bomb-pocked streets and burnt-out apartment buildings have become commonplace, galvanizing international support for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and exposing Putin's own struggles on the international and domestic fronts. While fighting is still going on and the Ukrainians are launching a major counteroffensive, many of the world's leading powers have started thinking about what will happen after the war ends and, more importantly, who will pay for it. For the first year after Russia's attempted invasion alone, the World Bank predicted in March that the cost of rebuilding Ukraine would reach $411 billion. This estimate is expected to stretch over 10 years and combines both needs for public and private funds. Although this is a staggering sum, more than 2.5 times Ukraine's total GDP last year, other monetary bodies have estimated that the cost of reconstruction due to the damage done by Russian forces is closer to $1 trillion. While there is agreement among Western allies that Russia must pay for Ukraine's rebuilding eventually, the means by which this will occur are less certain. When Ukraine gets back to normal, will the Putin regime pay for it, and if so, how can Russia's allies guarantee that the Russian check will clear? Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson stated in February that, in principle, it is clear-cut. Russia must pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine, while also acknowledging that this must be done in accordance with EU and international law, and there is currently no direct model for this. Nonetheless, the fundamental dynamics seemed clear. The money is there, waiting to be applied, somehow, toward Ukrainian aid, and it has been frozen by Western allies. The New York Times reported on Friday that has proved far more difficult than first imagined, and it appears less and less likely. Experts say this would be against international law and could set a dangerous precedent for nations to seize the property of others. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had previously expressed concern about the significant legal obstacles to using frozen Russian funds for reconstruction, citing the distinction between assets seized as part of criminal investigations and those seized from a country's central bank due to international sanctions. "We have on this small scale seized assets," she said, "but there are certainly legal challenges in doing more than that." The Economist argued that although the moral case to make Russia pay is obvious, it is also important to emphasize the practical importance of pressuring Russia to pay for the rebuilding costs. According to the article, for Ukrainians and their backers, the war is not just about defending one country against an aggressor but also about upholding the post-1945 global order, which is crucial to the stability and prosperity of the international community. Whatever the West does with Russia's frozen assets will set a precedent that will shape global behavior for decades. Legal channels do exist to initiate the transfer of funds from Russia to Ukraine. The Times reported that the seizure of the assets was possible through a vote in the UN Security Council, a ruling by the International Court of Justice, or a post-war deal, but that none of those options seem very likely, due to existing ICJ precedent and the almost certain threat of a Russian veto at the UN. The European Union is looking into novel solutions that would allow the initial seized funds to remain untouched while taxing the interest accrued while they are held in central securities depositories, or simply using the profits. However, Politico notes that each of these choices comes with its own set of difficulties. For example, it could discourage other countries to keep their foreign reserves in euros, as well as put European financial intermediaries at a disadvantage if the EU were to go it alone.